Hi, everyone. Welcome to the House of Lou podcast. I'm your host, Veronica Theodoro. This episode of House of Lou is sponsored by Opera Theater of St. Louis. We're recording 14 days after the tornado that took place on May 16th in St. Louis. Obviously, this is an event that impacted our community and continues to impact many of us. So I just want to start by taking a minute to acknowledge the families who have lost loved ones, those who are displaced from their homes and working through cleanup and rebuilding efforts. You're certainly not alone. I want to be sure to mention that I'm sharing a list of resources in my show notes where you can either help or if you need help, you can seek help. That information, again, is on our show notes, along with a list of home resources for people who are beginning to think about repairs. So, ironically, the plan for today's show was always to focus on home renovations. And now is a particularly poignant time to hear from experts about how to think through renovations, manage them, prepare for them. I'm joined today by architect Kristen Moomey of HKW Architects, whose office is in the Central West End, as well as award-winning interior designer Maria Hography, co-founder and principal designer of C&M Interiors. Their office is based in Compton Heights. Kristen and Maria think about this kind of stuff all day long at their jobs and in their personal lives, where they have taken on very, very large-scale home projects. I'm going to let them talk about the details of those projects, which are really fascinating. I'm excited to tap into their knowledge and experience and have them share their insights with you. But before I invite them to join me, here's what's been going on in and around my house. So this is the first recording that we're doing after the tornado. We were scheduled to record last week, but obviously it was just too difficult of a time to get into the studio. But it feels good to be back here and talking to home renovation experts. Like you, I am spending a lot of time thinking about repairs to my house and to my neighborhood. A lot of you may not know, but my mother lives 2 blocks from me in the Central West End in a historic condo building. And I've been helping her navigate this whole process of insurance adjusters and repairs to her home. And that is a totally different sort of beast to deal with. Her building has been, the trustees are incredible and they've been doing incredible work, but it's been a real learning process for me. It's hard to imagine the extent of the damage, the disruption to people's daily lives, but St. Louis has certainly shown up for its neighbors. Earlier last month, I wrote a story about Forsyth, the very chic St. Louis furniture showroom located in Creve Coeur. I visited with co-owners Maggie, Annie, and John earlier this spring to talk about their new direction for the business. For those of you who may not know, Forsyth is a St. Louis-based company that has been in operation for the past 10 years. They have built a national reputation for their creative take on vintage furniture. It's just really beautiful stuff, and I happen to own a few of their pieces that I really treasure. As of this spring, they're an authorized dealer of very specific contemporary brands that they have chosen to represent. Ling Rosé is one of them. Ellie Bonan Interiors, based in Florence, Italy, which is so good. And the Danish brand Fredericia, also fabulous. And the wonderfully rustic Old Hickory, which is based in central Indiana. This mix of old and new furniture in the showroom really speaks to the way designers and homeowners decorate their spaces. And I think that it's a fabulous move for them. And I can't wait to see what you all think. Keep in mind that the showroom is by appointment only. So if you'd like to take a look, their website is beautifully curated and a great place to start. Also recently, I wrote a story about the reopening of the Eugene Field House on Broadway. This historic row house was closed for more than 2 years after a pipe burst in the attic, causing extensive water damage back in 2022. The executive director, Stephanie Bliss, led the restoration project. She worked with an incredible team of historic experts, such as the decorative painter Charles Blood and the historic window restorer Alex Matan of Ambach. So if you love history and old houses and you want to know a little bit more about Eugene Field and his family, I definitely suggest you make a plan to tour this wonderful treasure. They are open Wednesday through Sunday, so be sure to check out their website for more information.
We'll be right back.
Experience an unforgettable night at one of St. Louis's cultural gems. Opera Theater of St. Louis's annual festival season is back, with 4 new productions and hundreds of artists handpicked from all over the country. A night at Opera Theater is more than just a world-class show. From pre-show garden picnics to post-show champagne toasts under the stars, Opera Theater offers a vibrantly social take on a classical arts experience. Come be a part of the story. Learn more about Opera Theater's current season at experienceopera.org. And now, on to my interview with Maria and Kristen. All right, ladies, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
This is exciting.
We've had to postpone this interview once already, so I appreciate your patience and your flexibility as we dealt with the aftermath of the tornado last week. I wanted to start by asking the two of you how you're doing. Were you impacted by the tornado? Just if you could share with us your situation.
I was actually out of town during the tornado at my older daughter's graduation, so I was out of state. Received the notifications like Minnie on the phone. But the first indication I had that something serious was happening was my business partner called, was very much in a panic, and was letting me know how the office had fared. Mm-hmm. So our office is located in the Holy Corners area near the intersection of Kings Highway and Del Mar. And we took a direct hit from the tornado, roof damage, and particularly car damage. So most of the trees around the building came down. Yeah. But luckily, everyone in the office was able to get to shelter pretty quickly and was safe.
Okay, great to know. And Maria, how about you?
Sure, and I'm so sorry to hear that, first of all. Our office and my personal home, luckily, were not impacted significantly. We lost power for a little bit, but nothing that was substantial. I had a similar situation. I was actually out of town as well, so that's very ironic. But my business partner also was at her home. She lives in Richmond Heights near Clayton, and she reached out to me as well and said she was so scared and so worried and was telling me what had just happened. And shortly after that, seeing all of the reports and articles and social media about the impact was just jaw-dropping.
I know that your interiors firm has put together in the days after the tornado a donation drive or something of the kind. Can you share a little bit about that?
Of course. So it's one of those things that, it's overwhelming after something like this happens. You think to yourself, I want to help, but how can I help? There's so many ways that I could do something. And most of the women at my office have little kids, so it's in particular very hard to find ways to be physically part of something like this. So yes, we do now accept Venmo donations to our Venmo handle, which is at C&M Interiors. And we're collecting those from clients, family, friends, anyone really who is following us. And we're doing purchases within our team and delivering those in person just to make ourselves somewhat helpful.
That's incredible. I will be sure to post that information in the show notes so that our listeners donate if they are so inclined. What's interesting about this episode is that we had planned all along to focus on home renovations. And so I think that in light of the storm on May 16th, this is a topic that's become even more relevant to our community at large. Many homeowners will be thinking about repairs and renovations to their homes. So I know the two of you have a lot of experience, obviously both professionally, but also personally in this area. So I wanted to just start by asking the two of you to talk a little bit about the process of planning a home renovation. What are, in your opinion, the most important first steps? Kristen, why don't we start with you?
Well, my personal journey in home renovation has spanned a quarter of a century now. And so my husband and I are both architects, and soon after we finished graduate studies at WashU, we started looking for a home in sort of the Benton Park, Lafayette Square, Soulard area. And we found a home that we fell in love with. I don't think anybody else would have seen our vision at the time, but we purchased it, and we've been working on that ever since.
And you have done so much. The email that you sent me was incredibly detailed and lengthy, and there were no words. You really have done everything to this home, and you continue to work on it. It's still in progress.
Right. Yes, we do self-perform a lot of work. Some of that is because of budgetary constraints, and a lot of it is because, we work in, larger firms doing bigger projects for clients. We don't do a lot of residential work. That's sort of where I started. So we find our house to be a place where we return to practice our craft and to think about and to always be learning.
Sure.
Right? So I think, how do you embark on this? I mean, that's a big question.
It is. Well, why don't we hear a little bit from Maria about her personal project, and then we can open it up to these first steps. Maria?
Sure. This is great. I love that you've been working on your project for a long time, because we've lived in our home now for about 2 years, and we're more so at the beginning stages. So it's kind of interesting. We have a little bit of opposite roles to play here. But so my husband and I bought a home. It's in unincorporated South County. It is not where we envisioned being, but we happened to just fall in love with the home after looking for months and months and said, let's broaden our search a bit. So we did. We fell in love with the home. It had been on the market for quite a while. It really needed, a couple that could come in and look at it with fresh eyes and say, this is not something that's falling apart. We just need to give it life again. But a couple things that I've really learned that, of course, I preach to my clients is first and foremost is having a good grasp on your budget. Really being in tune with what your desires are in line with what you can realistically afford. And I think that says a lot to how you can approach the project. Oftentimes we advise our clients to allow us to help create a master plan. And this is an amazing way to help people figure out how to implement their project. Budget, of course, goes a long way with that. A lot of people don't have the budget to do a massive renovation right away. So we like to really design and plan, whether it's super high level or a little bit more in the weeds, in the nitty gritty. We like to create a master plan for our clients. And so that's what we've done for ourselves personally. So we know exactly what we're preparing for, what to look forward to. And we also go ahead and pull together those estimated numbers to where, next year at this time we say, okay, I think we're ready. We've saved up a bit. We can do another project. We already know exactly what each space will end up costing us, and we have the design. We can do this now.
It sounds like really thinking long terms, regardless of the scale or scope of your project, is really important in terms of pulling together that master plan, that master budget. So you're really thinking perhaps years, months out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kristen, what do you think?
I love that, actually, because when you were talking, it made me think about the work that we do in our office with larger organizations that are stewards of people's hard-earned money and donations. And having, whether you're talking about a large-scale project like that or in your personal home, I think it's very important to sort of move back from the idea of what you want the finished space to look like and to really outline and identify what your objectives are. And those objectives are not things that, the material choices or the color palette or the special stone that you want or things like that. Those are bigger, broader objectives. I want this house to be safe. I want it to be secure. I want to reduce anxiety around, going back to the tornado. Do I feel comfortable in this space? Have I made good decisions at the beginning to create a framework that I can then inhabit, in the future? I can decorate it, I can add to it, but are the bones good? I think that's really important. So one of the things, going back to my house project, in the beginning, we didn't have a lot of money. We were right outside of school, but we really prioritized the infrastructure of the house. If you're familiar with St. Louis architecture, and in Benton Park in particular, we have a house that is a Second Empire style. It was built in 1885. It has a mansard roof, slate roof, decorative cornices, a dormer window that you can see the arch from. When I saw the house, which was in terrible shape, the cornice was falling apart. I mean, there was nothing, we paid less for the house than we did for our Saturn sedan.
I totally understand.
But we had looked at lots of properties that had developers come in and do some initial work. And we knew that the work that had been done was not what we wanted to see in the infrastructure of our house going forward. So it made sense to us, if we could be patient, to find something that we could really start fresh in. And so we prioritized furring out all of the walls, which meant we pulled all of the trim off. And I can't tell you how many weeks I spent driving square nails, which is what they were in 1880, out of trim, salvaging, stripping it, numbering it, all of that. We furred out all of the walls, insulated them, created shear walls, which laterally support these masonry load-bearing buildings so that they're more resilient in an earthquake event or in a tornado event. Tied down structure, at each floor level up to the roof. Really did stuff that no one sees in the end. But we know what we've put into the building, and that feels really good. So if it meant that we had to delay installing wardrobes, like our house had no closets in it, and so over time in each room we created custom casework for closets and wardrobes. We had to wait for some of those things. And I think that's really something to think about if you're considering a renovation in your home, to really have an honest conversation with yourself, with your partner, with your family. What's our tolerance level for the process?
You bring up a point of view that most of us, probably myself included, have not really spent enough time thinking about prioritizing how you want to feel in the home. And that has to do with safety and the structural integrity of a house. Obviously, a lot of us can't do that type of work because we're not skilled the way a designer or an architect would be. So we're relying on experts, contractors, a team of professionals to help us navigate this process. How would you advise homeowners to think about choosing a team? And is this a situation where, as the homeowner, you consider your priorities, like what you just talked about, and take that to someone and try to find a team that is aligned with your vision and the way you think about the home. What is the process of choosing the right people to work with?
I think it's really important for clients and any homeowner to really tap into what the intention is and find people that relate to those intentions. And sometimes it's just a matter of meeting the right person, reaching out to architects, designers, all of the above. But I think really thinking about what your intention is, if aesthetics and those types of things are your biggest priority, reaching out to a designer makes the most sense to me. If you are really looking to do a massive renovation, do an addition, do some structural work, it's probably a good idea to reach out to an architect first. And then from there, I think it's great to be able to build. We love to have the trifecta team of the designer, the architect, and the general contractor or builder. That's ultimately the dream team.
Kristen, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting in the coming years following this tornado event, how we are approached in the design field with our clients. And I do think that having a clear idea of what your priorities are will help direct you to the right team. I would also include in that team, it might fall under the umbrella of the architect, but a really good structural engineer. If you're doing a project within the city, one of the unique sort of headaches about this region is that we have so many different municipalities. I do work all across the region, and municipalities have different codes. They have different ordinances, so I can do a project in Creve Coeur that looks very different than a project in U City. But all of those areas in this sort of metro area have stringent code requirements. And so if you're doing any kind of major renovation that involves any sort of structural work on your existing house or additions, I mean, you're going to have to go through a licensed professional and get permit drawings and go through inspections and things like that. If you're embarking on something as large as that, then one of the big questions you want to ask the architects that you're interviewing or the designers' recommendations, who do you work with, who do you team with on structural work? I think another thing that's going to be kind of fold under this umbrella is civil engineering, landscape architects. I think people are going to think more broadly about the inside of the house and the outside of the house. And, what are the impacts of what I'm doing on the outside of the house? Veronica, as we were talking about, what sort of trees am I planting? Yep. The distance from the house, what am I thinking? We're all thinking of all of these things now a lot more. And I think that's a good thing.
The silver maple in my front yard has to come down. And I have thought about for years that I want to actually have two, I think they're called Taylor evergreens, planted in the front of my home. I have an Italianate, so that's very much in line with that architectural style. But we just went through this event, and I'm like, is it safe to have trees of that size so close to my house? So you're absolutely right. We are beginning to think about the exterior of the home as it relates to the interior more than I think we were previously.
Going back to those early years of renovation on our house and even kind of landing on the right house that we wanted, we would frequently go through open houses in the neighborhood, sort of watch what was happening. And I think in a city like St. Louis, where you have rich architectural history in so many neighborhoods, you have also the potential, and you have lots of population shifts over decades and decades in those areas. So you have a lot of housing stock that is really ripe for redevelopment. One of the concerns that I have always had in our particular sort of neighborhood and the style of houses is this sort of clash between the way that the house was originally constructed and how it actually is supposed to work to stand up and stand strong, and that sort of clash with the current design trends. So frequently you'll walk into these houses, which are masonry load-bearing walls, and they're tied together by the structure of the floor joist. So at each level, and then the roof joist at the top. In those interior walls that divide the parlors from the dining rooms and the kitchen space in the back, those are integral to the structure of the house and how everything stays together. And then you kind of have this sort of design trend of opening things up, modernizing, which modernizing the kitchens and adding bathrooms, those are important to houses that were built in a different century. But completely blowing out all of those walls is a real red flag to me when I walk through them. So I
couldn't agree more.
So I think at that point, thinking about what your priorities are, if your idea is that you want to live in a historic home, but you want a more modern, open floor plan, that's when you should be really looking at your design team and all the professionals on there so that you are making good decisions and preserving the structural integrity of your home.
I think that's great. And one other thing to add to that, which I think is the perfect segue, is really trusting your design team and really relying on them. So once you've really established and gained that trust and understanding of who you're partnering with on your project, I think it's absolutely crucial to be able to sit back a bit and trust those people. It's challenging when we meet with clients and we oftentimes just say, we really need you to trust us here. I know it's hard and I know it's scary to be going through something this intense. Maybe you have to move out for a little bit. Maybe you have to kind of step back and you're like, this is my life's work. This is my life savings. How am I supposed to just sit back and let this happen? But to both of your points, I think just being able to step back and trust the professionals you've hired, but establishing that team and making sure you have the right people in place with the right qualifications ahead of time is absolutely crucial.
And thinking about your own personal home projects, because they're so unique and they're great stories. I'm curious to know, Maria, we'll start with you. What's been your biggest challenge to date, and how have you and your husband overcome that challenge?
I mean, honestly, the biggest challenge is overwhelm. It's such a massive project. We have about 5,000 to 6,000 square feet, give or take a little bit. And we live on 1.3 acres of land. So doing that along with having 2 small children and animals and owning businesses, neither of us work for anyone but ourselves, it was a lot.
I can only imagine.
I know a lot of our family was like, oh, you guys are crazy. But, we have that vision for our future that we know that we just need to sit back and be a little patient with. Yeah. So learning patience and learning how to deal with that overwhelm and being able to say, okay, I can still have people over. I can still do all of these things and be aware that my home's not going to be perfect right now. Nothing is going to be perfect, but being able to accept that and say, we have a long-term vision. We know what the plan is. That's what we're looking forward to. That's what we're doing all of this work for. And that allows us to be more present and to be more in the moment. So that's been the biggest hurdle, frankly. Of course, there's so much more with budgeting and, I've even hired certain professionals myself, which has been a learning curve for me. Oftentimes, especially in a past home that we owned and other personal projects, it's always been small enough to where we can kind of handle that ourselves. But giving the same advice that I give my clients to be able to hire the right professionals and trust them has certainly been a learning experience, but very fulfilling and has led to some amazing relationships and even relationships that I can share with clients.
And I love the vision of your home, which you document on social media, and we'll share all that info, that the home is a home for future generations. It's for a place for family to come together. And I think that's a beautiful vision to have in the back of your mind when you're struggling with all of this. Kristen, how about you? In your 25 plus years of restoring this home, what do you think has been your biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge for me is that I have always thought about our house as a part of a larger community. And when you own a home that is 17 feet wide and it sits on a 25-foot wide lot, that means you were literally in your neighbor's business.
Yes.
So the western side of my house is my property line. The eastern side of my house is about 6 feet away from my neighbor's side of their house. And so any work that you do on your house and any additions that you do impact more than just yourself. So I often say, like, the sort of the final phase of our project will be the construction of a carriage house in the back on the alley. So we'll finally have a garage. I'll be in my 50s.
Awesome.
I'm going to have a garage. I won't have to scrape my car off in the winter. And with a living unit above. And that, you know, if I were constructing that in Webster Groves on half an acre, I mean, I could design those foundations in my sleep. Mm-hmm. When I'm going up to the property lines, I have to get variances. I have to go through cultural resources for the historic district. I have to go through planning and zoning. I have to go to a conditional use hearing. Those are complicated, months long, sometimes years long steps that you engage. And then the actual physical removal of dirt. I mean, you wouldn't imagine how much dirt.
In the home?
Yeah, just out of your yard. If you're excavating.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Where does that go?
You can't just put it in the yard.
You can't. And so you have to have good neighbors that allow you to sort of trash their yards a bit and then restore them. So there's additional cost and additional coordination. But for me, the real challenge is the sort of mental load that puts on me personally, because I don't like to impact anyone in a negative way. So that weighs on me. So there was a point in this project where we were sort of at the max invasion of our neighboring spaces. There was a little bit of tension, mostly love and compassion, but I could not sleep worrying about it. And I think that having a clear understanding of how you personally operate in stressful situations, going back to what you said with your businesses, I think every homeowner needs to have a really clear understanding of how much they can tolerate, as far as the mess and the stress and the added decision making, all of that. You know, I don't want this to sound like the luxury of sort of being able to renovate or even maintain your house. It is a privilege. And I want to be very clear that any level of maintenance or renovation work that you're doing, or just surviving within your home and your neighborhood, there are stresses related to that. And knowing yourself goes a long way towards alleviating and heading off some of that stress in a project.
I second that. I don't think that in the past, I've had some experience now, but in the past, you know, the mental load is not something that I took into account. It is absolutely real. What have you done that you're glad you did? Like what element of your renovation or decision making do you feel really good about? Maria?
I have two points to bring up here. The very first, before we even moved into the home, we had to do some pretty extensive HVAC work, replace our roof, have quite a bit of plumbing and electrical work done before it was even really safe and up to code to move in. So that was the first thing, that before we moved in, we made sure that we had a space that we could live, not inside the house, in order to get that done. So I think that's one thing too, also relating to the tornado and the disaster relief, is making sure that safety is top priority. You know, that's something that, like we've been talking about, having the bones, the structure, and the safety in place is not something that you can really go back on once you've started a renovation. Of course you can, but it's much more costly and invasive. So that's the first thing. We made sure it was safe, that we had all of the utilities that we needed and working functionally. The second, we are actually in the midst of right now, we're nearing the completion of our first phase of our exterior property renovation. It's an experience that I have not gone through before, besides just overseeing that and experience it.
What are you doing out in the exterior property?
Sure. So we are grading the entire property. It's one of those things that has been a little bit of a bittersweet situation. We had to remove every single tree on our property, and there was massive invasion of honeysuckle and so much rock and gravel and debris from the past owners had many, many vehicles in the back of the property. So lots of removal of junk, really. So that's been the first phase, and we're working with a really talented landscape designer who we absolutely love, and he's been crucial in helping us manage the project. And we now have a new driveway.
Oh, cool.
It's rock.
Congratulations.
We can't afford, the full deal yet for that long of a driveway, but it looks great. It's rock. We are getting a front porch step and a sidewalk. Oh. So now people can come over and won't have to walk through the mud. So really that's the big things that we've been doing so far. We've planted our first round of new trees, and to what we've been talking about, we're being very thoughtful about that. Nothing is going directly next to the home, and whatever's being planted, we're very aware of what types of plants those are, what they require, and what the impact may be. So it's really exciting, and it's very fulfilling to finally see the beginning of our hopes and dreams come to life.
Awesome. What do you feel really good about in terms of your home renovation?
I would say early on, so let's say it would have been about 3 years after we started the project, we restored the mansard roof of the house and rebuilt the cornice. There were missing pieces, the dormer, all of the trim. I mean, we did extensive drawings. We had a craftsman creating all of the pieces, but we had trouble finding a contractor that would do the actual carpentry portion. Okay. We worked with Vince Gray, who did the slate and the copper, and he was excellent to work with. But we had trouble finding a carpenter to do it. And so my husband did it. And I was pregnant with our oldest daughter. And when I look back at those photos, they continue even 21 years later. That daughter is now just graduated college a few weeks ago.
So exciting.
When I think about that space, that was the first real moment where I thought that vision in January of 2000, standing in front of that house that nobody else loved, that had been empty for 20 years. I could see not only that mansard being restored, but I could see that attic becoming a place to raise a family. And I could envision the start of who we were going to be. And it's incredible. It is such a beautiful space. And when I think about my girls inhabiting that third floor that used to just have pigeons, right? And to think about our families, like our parents, helping us clean that out in that initial year, all of these pictures of us before even digital cameras, all these print photos that we took. We look so young and so naive and so filthy. But, that has really been the heart of our home. I could see it in the beginning, and maybe it would take 25 years to get there, but the story we've written in the house, that house is a part of us, and I could not imagine leaving it. And I feel such compassion for anyone who has stood outside of their house 10 minutes after the tornado went through and looked around and met the eyes of their neighbors and felt such an intense love and sadness when they looked at their own sanctuary. Yeah, and absolutely. So I'm grateful that our house has let us experiment on her. And she's been a good friend.
I agree. And one thing that's so funny that you say that, we oftentimes, part of our brand and part of what we tell clients is to look at your home as another member of the family. Really, they become part of your family and they help you tell your life story. And so really thinking of them as another member of the family helps you have that compassion toward not just homeowners, but toward the home itself, and giving it the love it deserves, and being really thoughtful and not just, slapping a coat of paint on and doing things inexpensively just for a look. Right. It's really important to look at the home as another human almost that you're helping and that you are wanting to give the right attention and care toward.
Yeah, you guys are speaking my language for sure. So we've talked about a lot. I know that budgets are very, very personal. And so we obviously cannot dispense too much advice on that front, except for the fact that budgeting is an important consideration that we should take into account very, very early on. Anything else that we want to add to this topic of budgeting for renovation? Kristen, is there anything that you can add?
I definitely think going back to the idea of establishing those objectives, that can really guide your budget decisions. I loved what you said earlier in the conversation about thinking about a house as having a master plan as well. So if you have the right design team with you where you can envision where you want to be, then schedule and budget really work hand in hand. And, it doesn't all have to be done in 6 months or a year. It doesn't have to be magazine ready for photographing. As long as you know where you want to end up, you can then sort of prioritize the things that you need to do along the way. I think we also want to, when you think about budget, to always set aside an amount for the unknown and for any sort of shifts as you go along. So you may open up spaces or encounter things that are challenges that you want to feel equipped to address in the moment and not add to stress because it's pushed your budget.
Agreed. You can't imagine what could potentially come up behind those walls. So again, important to think through those decisions before you decide to open up a space.
Right.
Yeah. What do you think? Anything on budgets?
Yeah, everything you said is so accurate. Really, we love to be able to give the right attention and think through projects prior to getting too far into the weeds. Oftentimes, we'll even start with a simple floor plan intention. So, maybe at the beginning of the project, once we've gotten to know a client, it's so important to understand what the end goal, what the intention is here. From there, we really love to do feasibility studies super early on. Getting a contractor in there, we have a handful that we really know and love and rely on. We always submit a one-sheeter that kind of just says, here's the intention on the level of finish. I think being able to give that intention up front and work with a very skilled and appropriate contractor for your type of project is important. To Kristen's point, having a historic contractor versus someone who does a new construction is a completely different wheelhouse. Yeah. So having the right players at hand that can help you develop that high-level budget ahead of time is crucial.
Okay, turning to this whole idea of residential safe rooms. Most of us, a lot of us will choose to go to a basement in the event of a tornado. What are safe rooms?
Right. So I'll answer this kind of in two parts. At a more institutional level, newer codes are requiring storm shelters, particularly in places like schools. So if you do a renovation to a school, if your kid's school is getting a massive renovation, I guarantee you that they have a storm shelter incorporated into that. So that is really a hardened area that the entire population of the school can go into and be protected in the event of a tornado. So I know much more about the construction related to those. Where we're located in the Midwest and where our freeze line is in the ground, most of our houses, or at least historic houses, have basements. One thing that's an issue is a lot of those basements were accessed only from the outside. So that was the case on our house. We always had an areaway to the basement. So every time the tornado sirens went off, we had to grab our kids, go outside in the rain and the hail, and go down to the basement. So this final project, we've created a stair to the basement on the interior. So that was a major structural impact to the house.
Yes.
Wow.
Later in the game.
That's so smart.
So that feels really good because going down there is much easier. I think I don't know that you necessarily need to go as far as creating like an actual safe room, but I think for every homeowner, it's really good to evaluate where is the best place to be in your house. And that might mean involving a professional to come in and someone who can understand the construction of the house and say, this is really where you need to be in the event of a tornado.
All right, ladies, this has been such an incredible conversation this morning. Parting words, advice that you might have for homeowners as they grapple with decisions around renovations, anything that you would like to add. So, Maria, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Yes, thank you so much for having me on here. It's been a delight chatting with both of you. I think one thing that I really want to tap into, and that I've been talking with a lot of friends and family and my husband about, is having compassion. I mean, honestly, in these times, of course, there's so much logistically that needs to happen to get all of the tornado relief up and running, get these homes repaired, go through insurance, especially for those who do not have insurance. That's a whole different wheelhouse. But one thing is just having compassion toward each other as a community is so important right now for any homeowner who's been impacted, whether it's minor damage, whether it's your entire roof is missing. You know, there's so much variety there on the impact. Is being humble and allowing yourself to feel the way you're feeling and to be able to rely on your community. Finding those organizations and aid programs, whether it's faith-based or other ways to find relief. If you need a physical place to stay, if you need food, whatever that may be, but also it's really just allowing people to help, I think is so hard for a lot of us to do, but we all want to help. So I think just allowing people to get in there, whether it's donations, physical labor, whatever it is, reaching out, accepting that help, and knowing that this is what community is all about, I think is just so crucial right now.
And I think what has been so apparent to me is how much we're all in this together. We are not siloed in this. We really are in this together as a community. And I think St. Louis has responded in a really wonderful and generous way, but I think we need to keep that going. Kristen, what about you?
Yeah, that both of your comments really sort of synthesize something that's been in my mind. So our conversation today has really centered around more of the long plan, right, in a home renovation. And no matter what the actual schedule is, but thinking about the time leading up to that schedule and then the time after that schedule as well. I think at the community level, we need to have that same grace and patience with each other. And I think we need to really call on our community, those who are able to assist the most, our corporate friends and people who are positioned to really help, to think about the longer term needs for reconstruction and restoration of our neighborhoods, our homes, our blocks, that community who stood out on that street with us on day one. How do we make people whole again so that they can, on year one and year two, they can start to feel safer in the place that they call home?
I love that. Ladies, thank you so much for your time, for your expertise. It's really been wonderful to visit with the two of you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. This has been great.
We'll be right back. For the past 40 years, the Regional Arts Commission of St. Louis has funded the arts and culture experiences you know and love, and they're ready to celebrate. Join the organization on August 28th at the iconic Union Station downtown for a party like no other. They'll have it all: incredible performances, surprise guests, live art experiences, and more. Tickets are limited, so get yours at racstl.org. And now on to V's Views. I'm super excited about this new exhibit at St. Louis Art Museum called Patterns of Luxury: Islamic Textiles from the 11th to the 17th centuries. This collection includes textiles that haven't been on view in decades or have never been exhibited at the museum. So if you love interiors and you love textiles and history, this is a wonderful exhibit to take in. If you love design and pickleball, the Missouri chapter of ASID is hosting Pickled Pink, the organization's first ever pickleball tournament, on Tuesday, June 17th, so it's coming up, from 5 to 9 p.m. at Missouri Pickleball Club in Ellisville. Those of you who know me know that I'm a big tennis fan. I'm not a pickleball convert yet, but this sounds like an absolutely great event with a lot of like-minded enthusiasts. And lastly, smelling the bouquet, plants and scents in the garden is open now through next March at Missouri Botanical Garden. The exhibit explores the range of scents that are created by various plants. And the highlight of the exhibit is a chance to sniff more than 24 scents, as well as the botanical compounds renowned for use in perfumery. So a little bit of something for those of us who love plants, love fragrance, and perfumery. So be sure to check that out. I'll be posting links to all of these events in the show notes to make it easy for you to get the information you need. Thanks for listening to the House of Lou podcast. Be sure to follow us and share the episodes with your friends. Be in touch. Subscribe to our design and home newsletter at stlmag.com/newsletters and follow along on Instagram at St. Louis Mag. You can follow me at VT Lookbook. If you loved what you heard, show us some love by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you choose to listen. We'll see you next time. And just remember, there's so much to see in St. Louis if you know where to look.